The police lights reflected across the ranch gate like a warning meant to scare him away. What no one knew was that this call would expose a truth the HOA never wanted revealed. Ethan stood calmly beside his old wooden gate as patrol cars rolled in, dust settling over the long private road. The HOA president, known across the community for her sharp voice and sharper rules, stood with folded arms and a satisfied smile. She claimed he was blocking community access, insisting the gate violated HOA policy. Neighbors watched from a distance, whispering, already convinced Ethan was about to lose. The officer listened as she explained how the gate had been locked that morning, stopping deliveries and residents from crossing what she called shared land. Ethan said nothing at first. He simply handed over documents showing the land was part of his ranch, purchased long before the HOA ever existed. The officer studied them carefully, his expression changing. Still, the HOA president pushed harder, accusing Ethan of intimidation and rule breaking. She demanded fines, threats of legal action spilling from her mouth as if rehearsed. Ethan looked past her, toward the long road stretching across fields he had protected for years. He had warned them before. He had offered meetings. They laughed him out. As the officer stepped aside to make a call, Ethan finally spoke. His voice was calm, almost gentle, as he said this wasn't just about land. It was about control. And tonight, that control was about to shift in a way no one standing there could imagine. The HOA president smirked, certain she had won. She had no idea this was only the beginning, and the next move would leave her powerless. The officer returned with a slower walk, his tone now cautious instead of commanding. That shift alone made the HOA president's smile tighten into something forced. He explained that the land records confirmed Ethan's claim. The gate stood fully on private property. The accusation of blocking community access had no legal weight. A few neighbors exchanged surprised looks. The HOA president quickly redirected, insisting that even if the land was his, the road had always been maintained by the association. That, she said, gave them authority. Ethan expected this argument. He reached into his truck and pulled out an old binder, worn at the edges. Inside were agreements signed years ago, detailing a funding arrangement that most residents had forgotten. The HOA had never owned the road. They merely received funding to maintain it. Funding that didn't come from the HOA itself. The officer reviewed the pages while the president grew louder, accusing Ethan of manipulation. But the truth was quieter and far more dangerous to her power. Ethan had inherited control of the land trust that funded the road repairs, utilities access, and emergency services routes. The HOA relied on it every year, without question. When the officer finished reading, he returned the binder and said there was nothing further to enforce. The call was closed. The patrol cars left, one by one, leaving only dust and silence. The HOA president stood frozen, watching her authority crumble in front of witnesses. Ethan locked the gate calmly, meeting her eyes for the first time. He said nothing more. He didn't need to, because by sunrise, the entire community would learn who truly controlled the road they depended on. By morning, emails flooded the neighborhood inboxes faster than rumors ever could. The HOA board called an emergency meeting, panic hidden behind formal language. Ethan didn't attend. He didn't have to. The documents he submitted spoke louder than any argument. The funding source that supported road maintenance, security patrol contracts, and even the community entrance lighting all traced back to the same land trust. A trust Ethan now managed. Not maliciously. Not secretly. Legally, the HOA president tried to frame the issue as a misunderstanding. She claimed Ethan had acted emotionally, blocking access out of spite. But residents began asking questions. Why hadn't they been told about the funding source? Why were fines rising every year if the HOA didn't pay for the road itself? A board member finally admitted the truth. The HOA never owned the road. They just assumed control because no one challenged them. Until now, Ethan released a short statement later that day. He said he had no intention of cutting access or creating hardship. All he wanted was respect for property lines and honest leadership. The message was calm, almost disappointing to those expecting drama, but drama came anyway. Residents demanded audits. Vendors paused contracts. The board postponed votes. And the HOA president, once untouchable, found herself isolated. Her authority depended on control she no longer had. As the sun set over the ranch, Ethan stood by the gate again, watching headlights slow before passing through with permission. He knew the next move wouldn't come from him. It would come from fear, and fear was already spreading through the HOA faster than any rule they had ever enforced. The HOA president arrived at Ethan's gate just before dusk, alone this time, no witnesses. No officers. Just desperation disguised as negotiation. She spoke carefully now, offering compromises that would have been impossible days earlier. Shared access hours. Reduced fines. Even a public apology, if he'd help restore stability. Ethan listened, hands resting on the fence, his expression unreadable. He reminded her that none of this had been necessary. The gate had always been there. The rules had only become weapons when power went unchecked. He said the ranch wasn't the issue. Trust was. She asked what he wanted. The question trembled slightly, revealing how much had already been lost. Ethan said he wanted transparency. Open records. Clear boundaries. And an end to harassment disguised as enforcement. She hesitated, then agreed. But her eyes told a different story. Control once lost is rarely surrendered willingly. Within hours of the meeting, HOA notices went out blaming Ethan for temporary disruption. The tone shifted back to authority. Threats returned. So did warnings. Ethan expected it. He released the final document the next morning. It outlined the funding structure in full detail and explained the conditions under which it could be redirected. Legally. Cleanly. Without harming residents, the community reacted instantly. Support poured in. The HOA board fractured. Emergency votes were scheduled, and the HOA president realized too late that calling the police had done more than fail. It had triggered a chain reaction that couldn't be stopped. The gate remained locked that night. Not to block the road, but to mark the end of her control forever. The emergency HOA meeting was standing room only. Neighbors who never spoke now demanded answers with steady voices. The board revealed the truth in fragments, each one heavier than the last. Funding agreements. Deferred disclosures. Authority assumed without ownership. Every sentence weakened the structure the HOA president had built around herself. When her turn came to speak, her words felt rehearsed but empty. She blamed misunderstandings, blamed timing, blamed Ethan. But the room had shifted. People weren't angry anymore. They were awake. A motion was introduced to suspend enforcement powers until a full audit could be completed. It passed almost unanimously. Another vote removed the president from leadership pending review. That one passed even faster. Ethan watched the meeting recording later, alone in his kitchen. He didn't smile. Victory wasn't what he wanted. Balance was. The next morning, the gate opened. A new access agreement was posted publicly, written in plain language. No hidden rules. No threats. Just respect. Vendors resumed service. The road was maintained. The community settled into something unfamiliar but peaceful. The former HOA president packed her files quietly, avoiding eyes. The power she once held vanished without a scene, without shouting. Just paperwork and truth. Ethan stood at the ranch fence as neighbors waved in thanks. He waved back, knowing the story wasn't about punishment. It was about accountability, and the final lesson was clear. Control taken through fear always collapses when light is finally allowed in. Weeks passed, and the neighborhood felt lighter than it had in years. Rules existed, but they no longer felt like traps waiting to close. A new HOA board was elected, one focused on cooperation instead of dominance. They met with Ethan openly, acknowledging the past without trying to erase it. The funding agreements were restructured so residents finally understood how things worked. The gate stayed, but it was no longer a symbol of conflict. It became a reminder. Boundaries mattered. Respect mattered more. Ethan returned to his routine, tending the land, fixing fences, enjoying the quiet he'd protected all along. He never spoke publicly about controlling the funding. He didn't need to. Everyone already knew. One evening, a neighbor asked if he'd ever been afraid when the police showed up that first night. Ethan paused before answering. He said fear wasn't the problem. Silence was. And he'd chosen not to stay silent anymore. The story spread beyond the neighborhood, shared in small conversations and online posts. Not as revenge. As warning. Power without accountability always invites collapse. As the sun dipped below the horizon, headlights passed smoothly through the open gate. No tension. No authority posturing. Just people going home. The ranch remained unchanged. The community did not, and the truth settled quietly into place, where it should have been all along. Looking back, it all started with a single phone call meant to intimidate. Instead, it exposed who truly held the power and how fragile control can be. The HOA believed authority came from titles and fines. Ethan knew it came from responsibility and truth. When those collided, the outcome was inevitable. No one lost their home. No access was denied. No chaos followed. Just clarity. And clarity was enough to dismantle years of quiet abuse. The gate still stood, weathered and simple, guarding land that had always been private. But now it also guarded something else. A lesson every homeowner understood deeply: rules exist to serve communities, not rule them. When leadership forgets that, the consequences arrive sooner or later. Ethan never sought recognition. He didn't profit from the change. He simply ensured that power returned to where it belonged, shared and visible. Neighbors often say the community feels different now. Calmer. Fairer. Honest. All because one person refused to be bullied into silence, and that was the final twist in this unbelievable HOA story. If you love the drama, don't forget to like, subscribe, and drop a comment sharing your thoughts. It really helps this channel grow.